Assalamu alaikum. Dear student, I am Shariful Islam, your biology teacher. I hope that you are all well by the grace of Almighty Allah. Today, I delivered a lecture on chapter 13 for class 10. This is a new chapter for class 10, Environment of Life. At the end of the chapter, we will be able to explain about ecosystem, interrelationship between the elements of an ecosystem, food chain and food web, draw the comparison between the energy flow and the nutrient element of an ecosystem, compare the relationship between energy performance in between trophic level, explain the concept of an energy pyramid, explain the concept of an ecological pyramid in limiting the food chain, explain biodiversity and types of biodiversity, evaluate the role of biodiversity in sustaining the stability of an ecosystem, explain the interaction and interdependence in between different organisms in maintaining balance in environment. Then determine the reciprocal interrelationship between the producer, consumer and transformer in a given locality. Identify the causes of population of all the elements of a specific environment. Then we have to able to draw a flow chart showing the flow of energy, food chain and food web in an ecosystem. And we also described about the contribution of the components of an ecosystem to the maintaining of balance of the environment. At first, to start this chapter, we have to know about what is ecosystem or the definition of ecosystem. Our environment consists of all the organisms and non-living substance in the world. Organisms actively collected components from the non-living world and carry on their life, and after death become waste substance and mix with the environment again, sending back all the elements to the environment. Green plants collect carbon dioxide from the air and water from the soil through photosynthesis and produce carbohydrate, releasing oxygen into the air. For the whole living world, belongings of plant or animals, the oxygen required for respiration comes from the oxygen produced through photosynthesis. Both green and non-green plants absorb mineral salt from the soil as food. Herbivorous animals survive by eating different parts of plant in different ways. Carnivorous animals consume herbivorous animals and other small carnivorous creatures. Waste materials from all animals become mixed with the environment again. After death, all plant and animal bodies go back to the environment and are disintegrated. Bacteria and microorganisms do this integration process. This way, the balance in the natural environment is maintained. The exchange of energy and materials between plants and animals and the living and non-living substance is called interaction. I repeat this definition again. The exchange of energy and materials between plant and animals and the living and non-living substance is called interactions. Interrelations are developed through these interactions. An ecosystem is any unit of landscape where there are non-living substances. Food producing green plants, animal dependent on plant and microorganisms for the disintegration of the dead bodies of organisms, and a proper interrelation between these elements. For the different elements for nutrition and other physiological activities, soil, air, and water are required. Now, I said about the components of ecosystem. The living community, inanimate components of the environment and the physical condition collectively developed an ecosystem. Each of these main components is composed of some other small components. The living components are generally diverse as many types. These types is first non-living components, non-living matter. Non-living matter are divided into two types: inorganic substance and organic substance. Organic substance, organic non-living metals come from living substance, or inorganic substance comes from non-living substance or that are present in the world from the formation of world. Then physical matter, sunlight, temperature, water vapor, humidity, presence of air vapor in the air, deepness, height, etc. Living organisms, then living organisms, they are contain or carries lives. They are divided into three types: number 1 producer, number 2 consumer, and number 3 decomposer. I say details. At first, non-living matter. Non-living matter harbors the habitat of living organism, provide them with oxygen for respiration, and can apply some nutrient components as well. The components of all inanimate materials can be divided into two groups, such as inorganic matters and organic matters. At first, inorganic matters. Water, air, mineral substance in the soil which have not evolved from any living body but existed before the emergence of organisms are the inorganic components of any ecosystem, such as calcium, potassium, iron, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide, etc. Then organic matter. The waste materials of plant and animals or the dead bodies of organisms or substance derived from them are called the organic matter of an ecosystem. They are generally termed as humus. Some of the components of humus are urea, cells, tissues, and organs of plants and animals. This organic matter is nutritious for plants. This is why compost should be applied for the cultivation of plant. Most animals also like a soil composed of rich humus. Then physical components. The amount of sunlight, temperature, presence of water vapor in the air pressures and wind, depth and height from the surface of the earth, under the ground or under the water, all influence of ecosystem. They are called the physical components. These called are physical components of an ecosystem. Then the living organisms. The living world is the active components of ecosystem. They cause change in the environment through their activities. The living components of the environment are of three types. 1. Producer, 2. Consumer, and 3. Transformer or decomposer. First, producer. Green plants, in the presence of sunlight, obtaining carbon dioxide from the air and absorbing water from the soil, produce their food carbohydrates. At this time, oxygen is produced as a byproduct. This is why photosynthesis is the production process of an ecosystem. The producer are the green plant. These green plants are also called autotrophs because they can produce their food themselves. They do not depend on others for their food. Then, consumer. No animal can produce food from non-living substance in the environment. They directly or indirectly depend on plants for their food. This is why they are called heterotrophic animals. The animals which directly consume plant as food are called herbivorous. They are the consumers of the first line. Grasshopper, chickens, cow, goats, and deer are the example of herbivorous animal. This is the components of ecosystem. There are three types of ecosystem: non-living, physical, and living. Non-living are two types: inorganic, organic, and living substance. Already I delivered producer, consumer, and decomposer. Consumer also herbivorous, carnivorous, consumer third level, and top consumers. There are four types of consumers. The animals which depend on herbivorous animals for their food are called secondary consumers or consumers of second line. They are carnivorous animals. Toad, fox, tiger are the examples of carnivorous animals. The animals which eat secondary consumers are also carnivorous. They may be called tertiary consumers or top consumers, such as peacock, snake, tiger, etc. There are also animals who like to eat dead bodies of other organisms than the living body. For instance, vultures, crow, fox, hyena, etc. They are called scavengers because they keep the environment clean by eating the dead bodies of different organisms. Sometimes in the ecosystem, some animals play a double role as a consumer in two different levels of the food chain. Then the next term is decomposer. Some microorganisms like bacteria and fungus get their food from the waste of plants and animals and their dead bodies, and as a consequence they are mixed with the soil and water by being decomposed. This mixed component can be again consumed as food components. This is why these microorganisms are called decomposers or transformer. This is the chart of components of an ecosystem. There are various types of components in our environment. Now, I delivered a unique ecosystem in the world. This is a pond ecosystem. This is a pond ecosystem, and it described as a ideal ecosystem. Ecosystem of a pond. To take a close look at an ecosystem, a pond can be thought of. The deeper relationship between the organisms living in the pond and the non-living substance there can be conceived. The non-living components are the different types of organism and inorganic components like as water, sunlight, carbon dioxide, oxygen, calcium, phosphorus, etc. The living components are the producer, consumers of the first level, consumers of the second and tertiary level, and the different types of decomposers. So, a pond can be said as a ideal ecosystem in the world. First components of an ideal ecosystem as pond is producer. The producer are the photosynthetic algae and plants of shallow water. The free-floating microscopic organisms are called plankton. Phytoplankton, green algae, and other adequate aquatic plants which produce food through photosynthesis are called primary producer. Consumer of primary level. Different types of floating insect, larvae or mosquito, very small animals, zooplankton, rui and katla fish, etc. are the consumers of the first level. Free-floating small animals are called zooplankton. These consumers cannot produce their food themselves, so they live by directly consuming the primary consumers. Then consumers of second level. Small fishes, some aquatic insects, toad, etc. are the consumers of the second level. They cannot produce their food themselves and cannot directly consume the primary producers. They eat the consumers of the first level as their food. Then consumers of tertiary level. The consumers which eat secondary consumers such as small fishes, prawn, etc. is called the tertiary consumer. Shoal, vetki, boal like big fishes and stork are consumers as the tertiary level. And at last, decomposer. Many fungi and bacteria live in the pond as saprophyte, and they are decomposers. They live floating in the water or at the bottom at the muddy habitat. they attack living and non-living organisms and help them to be degraded, and as a result organic and inorganic chemical components required by the producers are produced again for them. The producer in the pond can again consume the substance created by the decomposer. This is a complete figure for ideal ecosystem, that is pond ecosystem. There are a non-living substance like as water, and also sunlight, humidity, carbon dioxide, calcium, phosphorus, etc. There are some living organism, living substance like as some trees, algae, etc. are the producer. Many types of fish or animal in the pond are the consumer, and at last bacteria, algae. This is a decomposer. Now there is a new topic, is food chain. Among the living components of any ecosystem, first the green plants start their activities. If they do not produce food, herbivorous animal and other carnivorous animals may die in want of food. When the food energy is flown from the primary producer through different topic levels, then this flow is called the food chain. For instance, the green grass on the field is the primary producer, and grasshopper that live on the grass. The toad eats the grasshopper and the snake eats the whole toad as its food. If the snake is small and there is a large guy snake around it, a reptile or lizard family, it will definitely eat the snake. In this case, a food chain may be formed as shown in the flow chart. This is a food chain. Food chain start from the producer, that is grass. Grasshopper consume grass as a food. Toad consume grasshopper as food. This is the secondary level. Snake consume of toad, and this is tertiary level. And guisap consumer of top level. This is a flow chart of food chain. In different ecosystems, food chains may be different, such as predator food chain, parasitic food chain, and saprophytic food chain. And now, predator food chain. The food chain, where organisms of the primary level are of the smallest size and consequently consumers of the higher level prey the organism of the lower level and eat them. This is called a predator food chain. The food chain mentioned above is an example of a predator food chain. This is a predator food chain. There, grass is producer, grasshopper consume of primary level, toad secondary level, snake tertiary level, and guy snake is the top level. And then parasitic food level. Parasitic food chain. Parasitic plants or animals in most of the case derive their food from the host much larger in size than they are. In some cases, other smallest parasites are dependent on all the parasites for their food. In this type of food chain, the primary producer may not be always at the beginning level. The chain remain incomplete. Like man, mosquito depends for its food, blood on man. And then dengue virus. All dengue virus are dependent for their cycling of life on mosquito. This is a parasitic food chain. Remarkably, the blood sucked by a female Aedes mosquito does not provide any nutrients to the mosquito but helps to develop its eggs inside the body. Then saprophytic food chain. This is saprophytic food chain. If a food chain starts from the dead organisms to the different trophic level, then it is called a saprophytic food chain. Saprophytic food chain always start from a dead bodies, and the nutrition from dead bodies form a fungi and then earthworm. Needless to say, this kind of food chain is incomplete food chain, and food chain described only part of the total interaction or interrelation of an ecosystem. Parasitic and saprophytic food chains are always incomplete since there is no producer in them. Both types of food chains, to maintain their activities, depend on or more levels of the predatory food chain. The food chain of an ecosystem are all based on the activities of the photosynthesis of the producers, and producers is green plant. This is our today's lecture. From this lecture, we discuss about the basic concept of ecosystem, components of ecosystem, various types of ecosystem, ecosystem of a plant, of a pond is a ideal ecosystem, and then food chain. So no more today. In the next lecture, we delivered about food web, nutrition flow in the ecosystem, energy flow in the ecosystem, relation of energy between trophic levels, and effect of energy pyramid to keep food chain in limit. So thank you very much. Stay home and keep feed to yourself. Thank you.